Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Andrew Doubleday aho. Welcome to this episode. It's a reflection for the first Sunday in Lent, Sunday the 6th of March, and it's based on the Gospel readings of Luke chapter 4 verses 1 through to 13. It's the temptations of Jesus. So we pick the narrative up in chapter 4 verse 1. Pardon me. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days, and when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." Then the devil led him up and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And the devil said to him, "To you I will give thee glory and all this authority, for it has been given over to me, and I give it to anyone I please. If you then will worship me, it will all be yours." Jesus answered him, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil took him to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test." But when the devil had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time. It's worth noting that these temptations are located in the Gospel here at the end of the 40 days. It's kind of counterintuitive that we would imagine that at that time Jesus would be at his weakest. And physically that would be the case. And yet the discipline of the 40 days of saying no, no, no all the way through had strengthened something within him. So I want to suggest that at a deep spiritual level, he was likely to have been at his strongest. But it doesn't mean he's not susceptible. The thing is that if these are to be temptations at all, they had to be real. I've had conversations with people down through the years that says, no, Jesus couldn't have been tempted. Of course he could. They wouldn't be temptations otherwise. There had to be an element in each one of them where Jesus felt the tug, where he felt the pull of the invitation to do exactly what he was being offered. It's true that what is temptation for one person is not a temptation for others. And it's true here as well. And yet I want to suggest there's something archetypal about these temptations. They were specific to Jesus, as we see in this text. Actually, all texts have the same ones. The order is a little bit different. But they are specific to him, but they also, I want to suggest, apply in one way or another to all of us. So let's look at them just briefly. The first one, the temptation to change a stone into a loaf of bread. Jesus is at the end. He doesn't have long to go. And that's part of it, isn't it? It's part of it. It's one of those things, and I could just imagine the temptation coming something like this. No one will know. There's just us here. No one will know. It'll be fine. It'll be yours and my little secret. Just come on. You've done 40 days. What harm is it? What harm is it? Are you going to wait till you get out of here? No. Do it now. Just turn this stone into bread and have a bit of a nibble. You deserve it. It's yours. As I said, no one else will know. It'll be our little secret. And there's a sense for Jesus is yes, but I'll know. He'll know. And he knows that it will eat away at him. Often it's the little things that eat away of it. The test is in the small things, not the big things. It's when we can actually conquer the small things that we can have victory in the big things. This is the small things. When I was about 14, I had a job working for my dad. Dad was a restaurateur in Dunedin. But he also had some drinks, fizzy drinks, vending machines in a number of businesses around the centre of Dunedin. And I used to service them. So I'd go there after school, head down. I was in about the fourth form from Otago Boys High School, and after school, and in winter of course it was getting dark and cold and miserable, and I'd go into these factories and I'd lug bottles of drink, and I would take the empties away and put new bottles in the machine and empty the cash into a bag that Dad had given me, and I'd take them home. In the middle of winter this particular year, it was cold, it was miserable, and Dad paid me for this. But there was a cafe just along the road from my last place that I did the drinks at, and they did fish and chips. And a few times I'd pop in there in the middle of the week. It was a cold, miserable day, and I was hungry, and I'd buy a piece of fish or a sausage and a scoop of chips. I'd take the money out of the bag to pay for them. That weighed on me for decades. For decades. I never said anything to anybody, but it kind of gnawed away at me. And it was probably in my mid to late 40s that Dad was living a little bit out of town. I finally sat down, worked out the compound interest on the money that I thought that I'd taken, and sent Dad a cheque and wrote him a letter for probably about a cheque for about $50, and sent him a letter. He never said anything, but he banked the cheque. And at that point I was kind of free. It seems you would think there's nothing. Actually it is. It's because it's a violation of the self against our own sense of value system, and it had gnawed away at me that I'd stole something from my dad. That's the first thing. It is a violation of ourselves. The second thing is that it's easier to choose to be 100% than to choose 98%. If your mind is made up something, I read a quote from Michael Jordan. He said that once I've made a decision, I never think about it again. If you've made a 100% decision of something you will or won't do, it's not something that's going to come back. But if you've gone to 98%, you're always having to revisit the decision. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's about eating ice creams or drinking coffee or whatever it is. If you've made a decision, a 98% decision that I'm giving it up, but there's going to be the occasion where I'm going to want it. Every time you're having to litigate the issue, that our mind is not fully convinced. We are always then playing around the edges. And my experience is that whatever the decision is, or whatever it is that you're probably not going to do, it consumes a huge amount of psychic energy. The little things actually matter. They matter. And so it's only a loaf of bread, and it matters. For Jesus, if he had said yes to this, It would have undermined his whole life and ministry going forward. So that's the first one. The second one is the temptation to power. I've got the ability to give you the whole world. Just think what you could do with it. Just think of the good that you could do. Just think of the difference that you could make. You're thinking of going in a completely different direction, but I'm offering you this. Just think of how many lives you could touch. How much transformation you could effect if you had the control of the whole world, and I can give that to you. The problem is that when the piper calls the tune, there comes a point where the piper must be paid. And it seems to me that in this process, if Jesus had said yes to this, his whole sense of mission would have been sidetracked. He would have potentially chosen the good, but sacrificed the best. And isn't that often the case? We sacrifice the highest for something lesser. And in the end, in the process, lose something of himself. Our sense of self disappears in this process, in this will to power, in this will to be somebody significant. Jesus doesn't need it. And we don't either. Jesus said, what does it profit a person if you gain the whole world but lose your very soul? And this was the temptation that was being offered to Jesus. Yes, surely you could do a lot of good, but in the end it all turns to dust. It's not the path appointed for him. And the third temptation. This is a toughie. You would think, no, this couldn't have been real for Jesus. Just throw yourself down from the pinnacle of the temple, says the devil, and the angels will pick you up if you're the Son of God. If you're not, splat, you're gone. But at least you've been saved from your delusion. But if, you will actually be seen to be justified. Part of me wonders if for Jesus there was a place of despair also, that even in the middle of this was able to grip hold of his soul. That someone would cast themselves down from that high place, knowing that if there was no intervention, he was going to die. I've wondered about that. You know, the times that we find ourselves at the edge, the times we find ourselves full of despair and wonder whether it's worth it. And there might be a temptation to test God in this as well. Well, if you're really with me, if you've really called me to this, if you really do believe in me, you'll show yourself. You'll vindicate me. Am I really, asked Jesus, who God says I am? Does God even really care? Because if it's all a big delusion, and here I've been wandering around in the desert for 40 days, I haven't eaten anything for 40 days, that can really play with the mind. I really could have got this seriously wrong and I'd be better off dead. And maybe that's something of the nature of the temptation. And he says, no, he's not going there. He's not going to put the Lord his God to the test. Although the temptation is real, there's a bit of him, deep bit of him, that knows the calling upon his life, and he's not going to stumble at this point by testing God. So there we have it. And he passes the 3. And it says in the devil withdraws from him and waits for a more opportune time. And then he goes off in the power of the Spirit. And of course he does. Because he's actually come through with his integrity intact, with his sense of self intact, with his awareness that even when pushed to the very limits, that ultimately he's not alone. And neither are you, and neither am I. If you're like me, it's so often so easy to make excuses for myself, why I did or didn't do something. Here we see Jesus not making any excuses. He holds on to the core sense of his call and of who he is. And he invites us to find strength in doing the same thing. God bless you.